What is up, guys? So I wanted to check out a video from Ratatosker. Liza P is the best Souls-like if you like to lose. I actually really loved Liza P. I love the story and everything about the game. At first, I was kind of standoffish with it because you go in thinking like it's a Dark Souls game, but it has its own like Sekiro kind of Bloodborne style to it. But let's jump in and see what he has to say.
I don't like Souls-likes. I think they're all bad, even the ones that are really good. And that goes for pretty much all of them. Neo, Mortal Shell, Code Vein.
Just saying, guys, I love Neo 1 and Neo 2. Those are one of my favorite Souls-likes game. I know the story wasn't great, but personally love them. Let me know down below which Souls-like is your favorite.
The Surge, the original Lords of the Fallen.
I like the Surge,
Some of
honestly.
these might excel in a few things, but they also fall short in other ways. Neo, for example, has interesting gameplay, but it also has terrible level design, and its story is nothing to write home about.
I love that,
Actually, that's a pernicious problem with these Souls-likes. Most of their stories are lame. In my opinion, they're not good, and they don't even have the decency to be bad in an obvious way. Many of them choose to imitate the From Software storytelling style, where the story is obscure and needs to be discovered, and even interpreted. And that works for From Software because From Software stories are great. They're excellent. I'm happy to delve into a From Software world and interpret its story.
Guys, I can't argue with that. Everything from Software story-wise, from Sekiro, Dark Souls 1, even Dark Souls 2 was a great story. Love them. They can't miss, honestly. Elden Ring can't miss. Let's see some more.
Discover its story. Because the story that I'm discovering is always worthwhile. Souls-likes don't do that. Normally what I find is that they have a bad story that just took longer to understand.
I didn't like Mortal Shell.
I should probably make clear here that I'm not including something like Hollow Knight or Blasphemous as a Souls-likes for the purposes of this discussion. We're talking about 3D, sword-wielding Souls-likes.
Okay.
The ones that are very obviously taking direct inspiration from Dark Souls. So don't come at me about the lore in Hollow Knight being good. I get it. I get it. My point is, Souls games scratch a very specific itch that Souls-likes just can't seem to. Except for Lies of P. I think this is the best Souls-like, and the closest thing you're going to get to a From Software game that doesn't actually come from Software. I've seen people discount Lies of P as discount Bloodborne, that it's too derivative, and there's some truth to that. It does do a lot to imitate a From Software title. But there's a lot of flattery in this imitation, and more importantly, it's imitation that worked. It's imitation that succeeded. It actually does.
Guys, in Lies of P, the boss designs had all of those bosses are like one of the best I played in a Souls. Like even in Dark Souls, they all had major, really good designs to them. Excellent.
Achieve the level of quality that usually is reserved only from Software titles.
Oh man, that clown! I hated him.
It also innovates. Some things it does do better. Combat in Lies of P has all of the Souls staples: the blocking, the parrying, the dodging, the deliberate attacks, the finding opportunities and taking advantage of them, to the point that it's actually easier to talk about what it does differently rather than what it does the same. So here are the systems in combat that are unique. First of all, it has a system similar to Rally in Bloodborne. In Bloodborne, when you took damage, you could regain some of that health by attacking the enemy soon after.
Yeah, that was good,
which
actually.
incentivized aggressive play. In Lies of P, it's a little different. You don't retain health that way when you take damage, you retain health that way when you block. In the game, it's called the Guard Regain, and you can get all of that health back if you attack the enemy before the Guard Regain goes away. It will disappear over time, or if you take any damage while you're not blocking. The game also has a parry system similar to Sekiro. If you time your block just before the enemy attacks, you will perform a perfect block to the monster.
Guys, I felt like the parrying in Lies of P was not like Sekiro. It was a lot harder, honestly. It had to be a specific time, a block to get that parry. That, unless it was just me. I know they done a bunch of patches to it, so it did change.
Perfect guard will consume stamina, but it won't consume any health. Like in Sekiro, enemies have a stagger gauge, although it's not visible in Lies of P. And those enemies will take stagger damage from all of your attacks and perfect guards. Eventually, they'll enter a staggerable state.
I wish it showed the stagger
HP bar flashing white.
Honestly.
Once this happens, if you hit the enemy with a fully charged heavy attack, the enemy will be fully staggered and open to a fatal attack. Each weapon also has access to 2 Fable Arts. Fable arts are the equivalent of weapon arts in Elden Ring. Each one varies quite a bit. Some of them will just do one big attack or a series of several attacks. Some will buff your weapons. They have a variety of effects. Fable arts use up Fable slots, which you can see here under the health bar. And you fill Fable slots by continuously attacking enemies in combat. The Fable arts that let you perform attacks also have the added effect of staggering the enemy when his health bar flashes white and is then able to receive a fatal attack. Your character also has access to Legion arms. These replace
That was
your
really
mechanical
cool.
arm with others with different effects, such as an electrical charge, a flamethrower, a cannon.
Guys, I used a flamethrower throughout the whole game. Honestly, that thing was OP. You could burn pretty much anything. Overheat anything. That was my favorite.
These arms can be unlocked and upgraded with resources you find in the world. And the upgrades you can unlock could be substantial. They often upgrade it in a way that changes how it's used. Healing items work similarly to Elden Ring, and they need to last you until you replenish them at the next checkpoint or after the next boss. But the healing does have the added mechanic that if you use all of your healing, you will be able to replenish one by attacking the monster.
That was great.
You won't be able to get more
I like
than
that.
one, but you can keep using up that one and then charging for the next one.
That thing came in clutch.
This is a really excellent feature and shockingly useful for combat with bosses. Since you can use up all of your healing, but if you perform well enough from that point forward, you can potentially have a very big comeback. Weapons have a unique feature in this game in that they are comprised of a handle and a blade. The handle determines the weapon's moveset and its scaling, and has a Fable art associated to it. The blade portion of the weapon is the part that you upgrade and it has a different Fable art associated to it.
I actually love
When
this.
you get a weapon, it'll come attached to its handle. But you can unattach that handle and attach that blade or handle to any other blade or handle.
It's a mix
which
and match.
lets you give your weapons a variety of different lengths, different movesets, different scaling, and mix and match Fable arts in a unique way. It's an interesting system, and because the handles and blades don't require any materials to put them together or separate them, it encourages experimentation. And it heightens the value of new weapons that you find, because even if you don't use the blade portion of the new weapon, the handle could give your existing weapons a new moveset that you like, or scaling that you want. Finally, the last type of upgrade is your P-organs. These upgrades give you benefits like adding another Fable slot, increasing the amount of healing you can.
See, I felt like a lot of people missed this with the P-organs, the upgrade-wise, because a lot of people would hate the fact that you couldn't increase your health. This was something that wasn't really explained right away, I guess, to people, but this helps a lot with a lot of different things, with stagger windows and health and other things, making you stronger.
You can use being able to dodge twice in succession,
Yeah,
increase
see?
the number of amulet equipable slots, or the
And the
ability to
dodging.
dodge quickly when you've been knocked to the ground. Those are just some examples. Now, these upgrades come in tiers. So in order to unlock the ability to upgrade the second tier of abilities, you first need to get 2 abilities from the first phase.
And then you jump to the
unlock
next.
the third
Yeah.
set of abilities, you need to upgrade 4 abilities total from the first and second phase. Unlocking these abilities is a little bit unique.
See,
Each tier of abilities has a certain number of slots that need to be
For
filled
attack, survival,
before you
yeah.
have finally unlocked the ability. In the first tier, that's just 2. To fill these slots, you use the special upgrade material called the quartz, and each time you insert a quartz into a slot, you get to choose a minor buff separate than the upgrade that you're working towards. These minor buffs are things like enhance the stagger attack of charge attacks, enhance the attack of fatal attacks, enhance the attack of fable arts, increase the enemy's stagger duration, enhances guard regain recovery when attacking enemies, lowers the damage received when you heal. There's a lot of variety. When you first start upgrading your P-organ, inserting a quartz will give you access to 16 different abilities to choose from, and that number just increases the more you start upgrading higher tiers. All of these systems are very polished, and they work together with the base Souls-like combat to give Lies of P its unique identity. Since we talked about the combat, we should probably focus on that. And this, I think, is the most important part of the video. If you are on the fence about getting Lies of P, this is the part you need to listen to. Lies of P is hard. It's very, very hard.
at first I found it very hard.
Most people are going to have a
honestly.
tough time with this game, even if they are from software veterans and are used to that style. And that's because Lies of P has a lot of elements that makes it abnormally difficult, at least compared to what the average FromSoft player is used to. So first of all, let's talk about the source of this difficulty. What are the attributes that are making it so hard?
Guys, at first with this game, I thought I just sucked, honestly. I was like, maybe I just haven't played a Dark Souls game in a while, but after a while, you start picking up on how the game is. You go in thinking it's like a Dark Souls, Sekiro. That's where I kind of got lost. Even Bloodborne, it has those aspects to it, but it's not exactly the same. Let's see if he says that.
Biggest thing is that when you're stuck in a boss fight in Lies of P, your only option, really, is to get good. There's a limit to the variety.
Well, I'm going to correct him on that. It's either get good or get some throwables, because those throwables are OP, and you could kill a boss with just throwables alone. Just saying.
Of builds you can make because all the builds are melee builds. There's no ranged or magic options, which many people consider easier in games like Elden Ring. No, this is more like Sekiro, in that the combat experience, the boss experience, is more focused.
Yeah.
The melee combat does still provide a great deal of variety, with the weapon mixing and matching and the Fable Arts and the Legion Arm and the different way that blocking and parrying and dodging work. But still, it is melee combat, and you only have access to melee combat. If you're struggling at a boss or struggling with the game, you have no option to make a magic build. You can't radically change how the game is going to play. You can choose to get a different weapon, you can assemble a new weapon, you can change how your build is going to work, and that might help you. But at the end of the day, you are still going to be fighting these bosses at close range.
I changed my build, guys. I went from a strength build to an advanced build. I changed later on. And then it's good to use elemental damage like the electric and the fire and just switch between them. And acid, actually. That acid, I forget what it was. It's like an acid weapon. I forgot the name of it, but it was very, very strong. I used that throughout pretty much almost to the end of the game, mixing with the fire dagger.
You're going to be playing at their tempo. You're going to need to learn their timings. And for some people, that's going to be a problem because some of those timings can be rough.
Time is very
I've already
short
described
window.
how the parrying works. It works kind of like Sekiro. But there's a big difference here. And that's that parrying in Lies of P is a lot harder to do. In Sekiro, if I'm trying to deflect boss attacks and I'm having trouble predicting where they're going to come from, or he's overwhelmed me with the amount that he's doing, then I often would just spam the parry button. I'd just guess and tap that sucker. And that was a sound strategy that would work.
Yeah.
You might still take a few hits, but you would deflect a lot of them.
I mean, I got the parrying down in Sekiro.
That is not going to fly. The timing to the parrying seems much tighter, and it's certainly not something that you want to try and spam.
Yeah.
Here's the best advice when it comes to parrying. If you are trying to parry an attack, and you push the parry button, and you press it far too early and you see the attack still coming to you, do not attempt to let go of the block button and then try and parry again. Most of the time that's not going to work. You don't have enough time. You're much better off just holding down the block button and blocking the attack.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In this way, the mitigated damage will become guard regain, and you can get it back through attacking the enemy.
Eesh.
The parry timing is simply too precise for you to pull it off by spamming it. Enemies also have these red attacks called Fury attacks.
Which you
These
can't
are unique
block.
in that you can't block these attacks, and you can't even dodge them. You have to parry them or avoid them completely.
I just would avoid
When I say you can't
them.
dodge them, I mean you have to completely get out of the way of the attack. You can't I-frame through it. And in many boss battles, depending on where you're standing when the enemy initiates these Fury attacks, you may not have time to physically get out of their way. And since you can't I-frame through them, you'll often be in a position where you just have to try and get that parry. You're going to need to learn the parry, because it's often the safest choice. The enemy bosses are just too dangerous to stay in the fight for long. Learning the boss's attack timings and parrying these timings will make the boss fight last less long, since he'll be building up stagger damage the entire time that you parry him. The dodge in Lies of P is fairly short range, and at the beginning of...
Guys, Archbishop had me stuck. I think a good hour. Oh my god, that was one of the hardest bosses in the game for me at the beginning. Besides a nameless puppet.
the game, you can't link two dodges together. There's a short cooldown before you can dodge again. But that doesn't mean that the dodges don't have a purpose in boss fights. You'll want to parry as much as possible, but there will be some boss attacks that are just too tricky. You might have trouble getting the timing right, or some attacks that if you dodge them will put you in an optimal position to counter. Judicious use of your parries, your blocks, and your dodges will end up being more effective than insisting on using one or the other. But even if you understand what I'm saying and keep all of this in mind as you play, this game is still hard. It's not just hard because of the qualities I described, it's just hard. If
It's
you're
very
the type
hard.
of guy that plays Elden Ring and he doesn't use summons, he doesn't use the Ash summons, you play a melee-focused build, and you avoid the internet so as to not spoil yourself or get unduly overpowered, it's still going to be hard for that person. And this, I think, is going to be the most contentious issue for this game. I've seen a lot of people bemoan its difficulty. But I don't think it's unfair, I just think it's not targeted towards the average player. On the bosses I got stuck, I got really stuck.
Huh.
There were at least several times where I would get to a boss, get stuck, and spend the next 3 hours learning its attack timings in order to get through it. And the game is extremely linear, there aren't other paths for you to explore.
Damn, I thought I was stuck longer. 3 hours? Damn. I was stuck on Archbishop probably for an hour or so. Once I learned his moveset, and then he was really weak against fire. But and I didn't. Did I use this? I might have used a summon. I don't even remember.
Down if you get stuck in a location. Even the most linear of Souls games would give you another path to go down if you're struggling on the path you're on. In Liza P, your option is get good, and that's pretty much it. The thing is, I don't mind getting stuck on a boss and spending 3 hours on that boss. I like that. I like that provided that the boss is good and I think it's fair, if I notice why I'm losing and can recognize it as my own fault. It's easy to make a game difficult. It's not so easy to make a game difficult and still feel fair. But Liza P, I think, did exactly that.
It did.
And so I was perfectly satisfied to run back to the boss and keep learning its pattern until I won. The problem is that not everybody is used to this, and they may not have the patience or inclination to lose this much this often every time a new boss rears its ugly head.
But it was fun.
Getting
It's a fun
stuck on
game.
bosses is not a new experience for Souls players, but there's not this expectation that it's happening all the time. There are really difficult bosses like Malekith, Melania, that are probably going to have a lot of people running back to them over and over. You know, these bosses have high enough HP, they do enough damage, their movesets
But this
are
is why we
complicated
play these
enough
type of games,
that they
for
demand
these kind
you
of
understand them before you beat them.
difficult bosses.
But that's not going to be the case for every random boss in a mini-dungeon. And it's not even true for all of the rune bearers that you have to defeat. No, sometimes, a lot of the times, the game just gives you a break. And you can beat a boss or several bosses in succession, your first try or your first few tries, without much difficulty. And Liza P does that too. There are bosses that are significantly easier than other bosses that you fight. But there's a big difference in the degree. Even a lot of the easier bosses required a decent amount of tries. You know, if I get to a new boss and I beat him anywhere between my first and my 10th try, well, that's an easy boss. That's a cause for celebration. While I was playing, I couldn't help shake the feeling that this wasn't really targeting the average Souls player. I think I'm pretty good at Souls games, and I like losing. I like memorizing enemy patterns. I like getting stuck at bosses for 3 hours. I tolerate that experience very well. And I have to assume that many Souls veterans had a much worse time with these bosses for a lot longer than I did, and they may not enjoy the process of learning these movesets as much as I do. The question is,
guys, let me know how long and which boss you got stuck on for long periods of time. Mine was Archbishop, and who else was there? Simon was pretty bad. That's pre-patch Simon. The Simon with the patch after is kind of easy, honestly, and the Nameless Puppet. But
is the difficulty fair? Is it bullshit? Is it too much?
I don't think it's too much.
And I think the right answer is it depends. Fans of the game will say, I'm sure, that Liza P is hard but fair. Completely fair. And they'll say this because the boss's attack patterns can all be parried. You can learn to dodge at the right time, you can position yourself better. The bosses are doable. And once you get accustomed to the game's tempo, you're better able to intuit the boss's attack timings. And all of those things are true,
Scrapped Watchman was
but
easy
it
as hell.
doesn't change the fact that I spent an hour on the first difficult boss and around 2 on the second difficult boss.
Damn, man.
And I know for a fact not everybody wants to do that. Not everyone wants to spend an hour on the same boss while they slowly learn to deal with its moves. And even some of the people that do want to do that don't want to do it this often. So while I do think that the game and the bosses are fair, I suspect that there's a lot of the average FromSoft player base that would disagree, and they're not interested in engaging in this kind of fairness.
But I gotta say, guys, if you're going into any kind of Souls-like or Dark Souls game and not expecting to be stuck on a boss, you're out of your mind. I think a lot of people got tricked being it was Pinocchio. Oh, it's a sweet game.
The art style and
Maybe, I don't know.
atmosphere of Lies of P have been compared to Bloodborne.
Yeah,
And with good reason, it is like Bloodborne.
a
It
lot.
is trying to be like Bloodborne.
In
Even
its
the
own
story
way.
is a little bit like Bloodborne, but that's okay because it does a good job.
I
at
love
being
Bloodborne.
The game takes place in the city of Krat. Krat is a city characterized by the economic prosperity and technological innovations brought about through Ergo and the creation
I
of
love the
puppets.
story of this game.
These puppets were ubiquitous in the city, which made them all the more devastating when they frenzied, attacking every human in sight. You play as Pinocchio, a special puppet unaffected by the frenzy with the human ability to lie. The atmosphere cultivated by Lies of P is top tier. The city is marred by the destruction of the frenzy, but you can still see the greatness and beauty and pride that it had before. Frenzied puppets wander the streets looking for new victims. The surviving human stalkers fight back against the puppets and decorate areas with puppet corpses. The city of Krat is really, really gorgeous, and it's surprisingly varied even though it's still within the city. There's metro stations, city streets, central plazas, industrial factories, opera houses, arcades, exhibition galleries, and even swamps and town outskirts.
Swamp area is a pain.
Exploration exists, but it's linear. The game is very linear. You can explore within the
I sometimes
levels,
like linear in these
and
type
it's
of games.
worthwhile to do so.
Depends
The
on your
levels are
mood.
well designed, and they do weave back into each other, letting you open up checkpoints to avoid previously explored sections. But these checkpoints are still very focused. They're just checkpoints for that level. There's never a situation where you can go on an obscure path that will lead to a different area of the game. You tackle this game one level at a time, and if you're stuck at a boss, you don't really have the option to go elsewhere. I didn't really see the lack of exploration as a problem. To make up for it, the game's levels are just well crafted. The experience is very focused, and
They
it
all go
keeps
back
you
to the
moving
hotel
forward.
too, which was
There's
awesome.
a low amount of stargazers in each level, but there's a good amount of checkpoints smartly placed that let you get back to those stargazers easily. The storytelling in Lies of P takes its cues from Sekiro. In Sekiro, the story is told more overtly than typical for a From Software title. It just tells you what's going on. But there's also a lot there for people that want to look into it and dig. Lies of P takes the same approach, trying to capture the best of both worlds, which was a very good decision in my opinion. As I mentioned earlier in the video, one of my pet peeves with Souls-likes is that they make their stories obscure, but rarely manage to make their stories worthwhile. They rarely warrant the obscurity. The story in Lies of P is direct, it's easy to understand, you know who you're fighting against, you know what characters are what. But beneath that, it's also infused with symbolism and metaphor. Really good symbolism and metaphor.
Very good
To
story.
the point that I'll probably make a lore video on it very soon. A highlight in Lies of P is the music and the sound design. The boss music is really good, so is the environmental effects. Things like rain and wind, footsteps on
And Pinocchio and Geppetto were really good together. Like the chemistry obviously was really good. I love that. What else?
cobblestones. They're always very noticeable, as is the sound effects of attacks. Blocking and perfect blocking especially have a very satisfying clang to them.
Yeah.
There's no environmental music most of the time, but there are areas where music is played in the world through speakers, and it contributes wonderfully to the atmosphere of the game. The voice acting is hit or miss, but more hit than miss.
Yeah, I agree.
What I find most impressive about Lies of P is that this is the Korean studio that made its first attempt at making a Souls-like.
They did a good
and I
job.
think it's their second game they've made ever.
I don't know what the first
And
game
they
is.
came out swinging. It has an amazing amount of detail, polish, and quality. It has few bugs, it has great performance, a huge attention to detail, good story, good lore, great combat. No Souls-like has ever scratched the From Software itch for me, and Lies of P did it easily. I believe it represents the beginning of a new golden age for these types of games. The developers that make Souls-likes are finally understanding what it is that made Dark Souls good, and I predict that from here on out, Souls-likes will be closer to the mark and of a higher quality.
Lords of the
And that's
Fallen,
the end
not
of
so
this video.
much, but
As always, thank you very much for watching.
guys, that was a pretty good video. I agree with him. Lies of P was one of the better of the Souls-like. Personally, I still, anything from Software is awesome. You know, Bloodborne and Elden Ring and all that stuff. But I really like Neo a lot. Neo 1 and Neo 2 were personally one of my favorite ones because I always loved Ninja Gaiden, which was a good one too. Liza P did do a really good job compared to, I know it's like a mixed bag, but Lords of the Fallen that just came out. I wasn't too big on Lords of the Fallen. Still a pretty decent game, but I don't think it compared to Liza P. Actually, guys, you know what I like? As a Souls like is Ashen. Ashen was a pretty good Souls like. Very low budget, but it was a pretty good Souls like, guys. Yeah, guys, let me know down below which is your favorite Souls like game. For me, like I said, Neo 1, Neo 2. Not counting anything from software, so we'll go from that route. Let me know down below what you like and what's your favorite from software game. But I'll catch you in the next one, guys. This is Lone Viking out.